Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, beta, in the last class, we had gone ahead and we had talked about the agricultural sector in India, right? Today, I want to go ahead and I want to continue my discussion and I want to talk about the industrial sector of India. All this is with respect to our period which we had in mind, which was the period of independence. So when India just got independence, how was the industrial sector? We will go ahead and we will discuss that in today's class. Clear hua beta? Okay. So please write down. So these are what we had done in the last class. We talked about the causes of stagnancy. We talked about the agricultural sector. We talked about this, right? So today I want to go ahead and I want to start with the state of Indian industry and its structure. Okay, beta. So today we want to go ahead and understand why the Indian industry was also very backward. Ab samajhne ki koshish karo. Let me first explain you, then I will write it down. Huh? Now, see, when I talk about India, India had one of the best resources of, as compared to the world. Now, when I say the best resources, better, what do I mean? I mean, it had an excellent iron ore. It had manganese deposit. It had gold, bauxite, iron, gypsum, mica. मतलब जितने भी resources you can imagine, whatever resources are required for us to go ahead and run a good industry, all those resources were present in India. ठीक है जी? But even though these resources were present in India, India's industry sector was not doing well. सब कुछ था, स्टील था, आयरन था, सारे रॉ मटेरियल्स थे, क्रोमियम, गोल्ड, बॉक्साइट, manganese, everything, all the resources were there. Still, the industrial sector was not performing well, right? One main thing that we saw, and one main, thing that happened in India was that during the British era, only the raw material was exported. सिर्फ raw material बाहर भेजा जाता था, and the final machineries were imported. So India was not made capable ever to produce its own final goods and service, final machinery को produce करने के लिए India was never encouraged. India was always encouraged that you go ahead and you import your raw material and you get the final goods. Right, beta? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there were a lot of restrictions that were imposed on what could be exported from India outside and what could be imported into India. हर चीज पे बहुत ज़्यादा restrictions British ने impose की हुई थी. Third thing. The third thing was that the traditional sector of India was also ruined. जो भी, what is our traditional sector, beta? The handicraft sector, the jute industry. So that handicraft sector, that jute industry, it was also completely ruined during the British era. That's the third thing. Fourth thing, we saw that slowly the modern industries had started developing, but that was very slow progress. So modern industries आ तो रही थी, but वो बहुत ही slow थी. So we saw that the iron and the steel industry, they started developing after 1907, and and the sugar, cement, paper industry, but they came during 1930s. So ये industries आ रही थी, जो शुरू का period था, the initial industrial development in India, that was confined to cotton and textile. दो ही चीजें grow करी थी, cotton and jute textile. And slowly we started seeing that, okay, there was some growth during the 1900s in iron and steel industry and in sugar, cement and paper industry. But all this was also very limited. It's not that it was growing at a very high rate. No, very limited growth was there. So when we got independence, we saw that this industrial development, जो cotton or jute textile industry में आई थी, it was still accounting for 30% of the workers employed, right? So we saw that when we go ahead and we see the entire manufacturing sector as a whole, तो अगर मैं सिर्फ मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर में कंट्रीब्यूशन देखूं हर इंडस्ट्री का, so cotton and jute textile industry, it was contributing approximately 57%, right? And then it was followed by sugar, engineering, steel, cement, etc. So we understand that the industrial revolution was taking place in India also, but the speed at which it was taking place was बहुत ही slow था. It was a pretty slow speed. That's the first aspect. Now also try and understand that even though the modern industry had started growing, still what we saw in India is that, so imagine modern industry was growing, traditional industry was going down, but the rate of growth was slow and the rate of fall was high. तो ज्यादा ट्रेडिशनल का जो ग्रोथ रेट, जो गिरने का रेट था वो बहुत ज्यादा था, मॉडर्न का उठने का रेट स्लो था. So it was growing at a slow rate, it was falling at a high rate. So ultimately we saw that the growth in modern industry could not compensate for the fall in the traditional industry. Traditional बहुत ज्यादा fall कर रही थी, modern बहुत कम grow कर रही थी, so it could not completely compensate the fall in the traditional industry. हाँ बेटा, that's the next aspect. The next thing that happened is that we saw that only 2.3 when we got independence during that period till 1950s, 1951 में जब हमने finally we had the planning commission in place. So what did we saw? We saw that only 2.3% of the labor force, it was employed in the modern industry. बाकी सारा labor force, it was there in agricultural sector or the traditional industries, etc. So even though modern industry was growing, still it was not generating too much employment. Only 2.3% of the labor force was employed in the modern industry. So that's also an important figure. Okay, beta. So now I will stop here for now and I will start writing this aspect. Then I will explain you further. तो पहले इतने पार्ट को लिख लेते हैं. So please write down. Start writing with me. So write down that another. No, let's try by talking about the backwardness. So the India's India's backwardness in the state of industry existed despite its vast industrial resources. So even though there were vast industrial resources, as I told you, we had iron, manganese, we had bauxite, gypsum, we had even atomic, we had raw material for atomic industries also. Still, even though we had a vast amount of these industrial resources, still we saw that India was backward in the industrial sector. India was not growing in its industrial sector. So please write down. We will talk a little about India's resources. India's iron ore deposits were estimated at 21,000 million. Which were a quarter of total world's deposit. So see, imagine 1/4 of the total iron available in the world was there in India. So manganese manganese. Deposits were third largest in the world. Right, beta? So India also had, so as I told you, India also had a lot of chromium, gold, bauxite. So I will write this down. Chromium, gold, bauxite, right? And various non-ferrous metals. Non-ferrous matlab kya hota hai beta? So ferrous refers to iron. So non-ferrous means other than iron also I had a lot of metals which were important. Raw material for atomic industry. Okay, beta. So you see this. I had 21,000 million iron ore, and it was one-fourth of the world's total deposit. We had manganese deposit, which was third largest. We had chromium, gold, bauxite, and we also had non-ferrous metals, which were raw material for the atomic industry. Okay. So we also had gypsum, we also had mica, and mica was largest in the world. So please write down. India also had kya? We still have all this, gypsum and largest deposit of mica. So you see, we still had a rich amount of raw material present, right? We still had a lot of energy potential, right? We could build energy also. So when one would see that, these are the amount of raw materials that we have, one would imagine that we will get a leading position in the world industry, especially steel industry, especially engineering industries. But despite that, right, because we just got independence and none of our industries were developed. Raw material to सारा था, but industries developed ही नहीं थी. Raw material के होते हुए भी मेरी industry developed नहीं थी. So because of that, we can say that so I have above lines just mentioned the potential of India. So we see that there was huge potential in India, but despite that potential, India was not doing very well, right? So write down India's largest resource bank would give her leading position in world's steel and engineering industries both, engineering industries. So this is what was told by Bethlehem. He told this in 1968. So Bethlehem in 1968 mentioned about all